I purchased a Ouija board from Amazon thinking it was bullcrap. Had some friends over and we popped it out, three of us with our hands on it, and we were asking questions. Nothing happens. We leave the slider on the board and leave the room. Come back, and the slider has slid off the board onto the floor. Needless to say, we were pretty freaked out. Ever since then, my house has come to life. I've seen dark masses peeking around corners multiple times. I look, and it goes away, and then it appears when I look away. My parents and brother have also said they've seen and heard weird things since then, their name being called when no one calls it. My brother claimed his phone charger slid across the floor. I had a different friend over a few weeks ago, and he woke up in the middle of the night and saw a tall, dark figure standing in the doorway, watching him sleep. I asked everyone in the house, and it wasn't them, and last night is the tipping point. I woke up at around 3:15 and saw a dark figure at the end of my bed. No face or distinct features, just a very big, very dark figure, darker than the darkness as there was no light in my room. And it disappears and I felt so cold. I managed to go back to sleep and woke up throwing up this morning. I don't know what I brought into my house, but let this be a warning. Ouija boards are not to be messed with. This is a story from my life that I've told to people, especially teens, to warn them to never use the Ouija board. It's long, but I hope it serves that purpose here. When I was a senior in high school in 1989, my brother came home from college on spring break and told stories about him and some friends using the Ouija board. It had done some things to freak them out, so we dug out the one we had in our attic. I don't know why we had it or where we got it from. He showed me what they had done, but nothing happened with us. I brought it to a friend's house, and we tried it out a few times over the course of a few evenings, and then about the third or fourth time, it really started to pick up in its responses. We had been starting by knocking 3 times in the corner of the board and saying something like, "Come spirit," or something to that effect. Anyway, the marker started to really move around the board and spell things out. I always tell people that it was either our subconsciousness or a spirit moving it around, because I was certain neither of us was moving it intentionally. With a light touch of a few fingers from each of our hands, it would just move to spell things like its own personality. We would ask it all the usual questions, test questions and curiosity ones. One day, though I wasn't a fan of it, my friend asked the board in which years we would each die. It spelled out something like 2040 or 40-ish for my friend. I actually don't remember the number, just that it was far in the future at the time, and 1990 for me, which was the next year. I asked, does that mean I'm going to die in 1990 and my friend in 20, __? No, it said. Then I asked again, this time switching the years around between us. Yes, it said. We asked the spirit about itself. It said it died the year my friend's father was born, and said its name was Stephen Crane. We kind of laughed at that part. Of course, I looked up some dates about the author after that, but things didn't seem to jive. I thought, could be another person with that name, and moved on. Anyway, we started to invite friends over to watch, who were all entirely skeptical. By the end of the evening, every single one was freaked out. More and more friends would come each night until we started getting a huge group of people. The board would answer plenty of the test questions wrong, but then, for example, while everyone's reacting to the wrong answer and half paying attention, it's spelling out sorry. And another time, for example, in a lull between activity while people are distracted and chatting, it moved slowly to S, then kept circling around to HHHHH until it came to a stop there. Nothing for about 2 minutes. The entire room of people completely silent. Then it slowly moved to OK. It said a bad spirit had passed through the room. Everyone freaks out. It didn't like this one friend. And every time he even entered the room when we had those gatherings, the marker would twist and move to the opposite side of the board. And other things like that happened. Again, it had its own personality. I remember a few times driving home alone with that thing in the back seat of the car, terrified with my heart pounding. One time I asked it, where will I go to college? It spelled out one of the schools I was applying to and then 37. I asked if I was going to go to that school and get a 3.7 GPA the first semester, and it said yes. I was sure all along that my friend wasn't moving it intentionally, but I had proof because one day he was really disturbed and frustrated with his girlfriend, a friend of mine. He had suspected she was cheating on him, and he asked the board a question about her while using it with a friend, and it told him to turn on the TV. The video for the song What You Don't Know Might Hurt You by Expos was playing on MTV. I remember he really took that to heart, and it affected his trust in their relationship. So I always knew he wasn't just playing around with the board, and that was a sort of hard proof of it. We started to actually use the board with our friends, but it only worked when one of us two used it with someone. We asked the spirit why that was, and it responded that the spirit was inside my friend and that I was the owner of the board. Freaky stuff thinking back on it now, but as an 18-year-old you think differently. Anyway, the enthusiasm started to peter out after a few months, maybe near the end of the summer, and I don't know what happened to the Ouija board. I did end up going to that college that the board mentioned, but it didn't really catch my attention. When I got home from my first semester after 1990 had just begun, I got my grades. I got a 3.7. I don't remember if I made the connection or not, but I certainly did when the next thing happened. Around the same week or so, maybe even around the same day, I got the annual catalogue that my college sends out with articles and updates and whatnot. I opened it up, and there in front of me was a whole article about Stephen Crane. He had gone to my college for a while, and I never had any idea of it. I remember having chills. 10 years later, I was buying a condo, and a lot of serendipitous things, good things, were happening around the purchase. That event with the Ouija board was so salient with me that I decided to do a good search to find out if a Stephen Crane had lived in the condo I was buying. I didn't find anything, and the condo was great, but if I had found something, I would definitely have pulled out of the P&S. Finally, the sad part is that later in 1990, after returning to college classes after Thanksgiving break, my friend, one of my best friends, died suddenly and unexpectedly from a heart problem. I don't know when I made the connection with the board because by then it was over a year later. But at some point I did, and when I started to put the whole storyline together, it sank in more how creepy and dark the whole thing is. I am happy in life, very blessed. I did go through a form of spiritual growth some years ago where this darkness was left behind and this story of my past doesn't haunt me. I share it in the hope it's helpful for others. But I would never touch a Ouija board again, and would strongly advise against anyone using one. To this day, I am still positive that it was not our conscious action at work, but either our subconsciousness or truly a spirit. So, whichever of those you might believe it is, nothing good comes from playing around with either of them. At the minimum, negligence can open up a path for psychological and emotional problems. And at worst, relating with a spirit can let in a darkness and fear beyond your understanding or strength that can tint your life and affect you for time to come. After reflecting on the post, I wanted to add more context for the reason for posting and choice of title. I mentioned a few times that I thought the source of the board's movement was either subconsciousness or spiritual paranormal. As a person of religious faith, with a science and engineering background, I still do think that it was one or the other, or a mixture of both. I have a great respect for both the human sciences and human spiritual wisdom, and both of these have always had guidance in the form of professional individuals and/or community experience, for a reason. Psychology and spirituality can be very deep and heavy, so they can be quite dangerous and harmful if practiced without experienced guidance. The problem with the Ouija board is that it is mass-produced and marketed as an innocent game for kids aged 8 and up, which is not only an insult to both science professionals and human wisdom traditions, but also creates the dangerous situations of people playing with their psyche when they are not equipped to process the consequences. Under the branding of innocent game, Ouija boards make it into the homes and hands of unprepared, unguided people, causing psychological and spiritual damage. I think it's reckless and negligent on the part of the manufacturers so I don't so much blame the Ouija board as I do them. So I hope my story presents one example in all of that context, and that is why I say don't use it.